start by using a flat blade screwdriver, putting in the notch and popping off the center cap. Using a 22mm socket and an impact gun, we'll go ahead and remove the nuts. Remove the wheel. All right, I'm going to go ahead and use a pry tool and just pop this harness out. And with that loose, we're now going to go ahead and pull this clip back. Put a screwdriver in here. Push that connector back. And just connect that. All right, next we'll use a small screwdriver. Pop it in this connector clip right here. And open this up. Release the wire. Next is use a 10mm socket, remove this bolt from the upper control arm. That supports the electronic level sensor unit right there. And just pull this off to the side. All right, next we want to go ahead and use an 18mm. I'm using a box end wrench right here. And you want to go ahead and loosen this. You don't want to remove this nut. Just take it off about 3/4 of the way. Now with that nut about 3/4 of the way down the thread of the ball joint, I'm going to use a hammer and strike the side of the knuckle to release this ball joint. Now here we have a support or a jack. You can use a regular car jack to support that knuckle. We also have a nut on the back side of the ball joint to keep this together. With this jack supporting the knuckle, we're now going to go ahead and remove that 18mm nut from the upper ball joint. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove these two lower strut bolts. The reason why we're doing this is that the upper control arm bolts will have to go inward on each side, and the bolts are going to hit the spring on the strut. So we need to remove or relocate the strut in a position so we can get these bolts out. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the wiring harness clip that's mounted on the top of the strut here. And there's going to be 3 nuts we have to remove, one in the back here, one in the front, and one positioned over here. All right, we're on the last stud here. We'll get that removed. Now we're going to go ahead and use a 14mm socket and a wrench and remove the sway bar end link. And just want to go ahead and bonk this here. Now I'm going to go ahead and lower the jack that's supporting the knuckle, and that will release the pressure off of the strut. We should be able to go ahead and pull that strut out. And once the upper studs are loose, go ahead and pull the strut up through the top of the control arm. Using a 21mm socket, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the back control arm bolt here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the nut from the bolt. And then we'll go ahead and do the same on the front. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and on the front, we have one of the cam units here for the alignment. I'm going to slip that off of the bolt. You can see that there's a plastic alignment guide here, and that is placed in there from the factory. We're going to go ahead and reuse that. That'll help us get as close as possible on our reassembly. Go ahead and work this bolt out, and if you need to, you can go ahead and tap that bolt with a hammer to get that out. And we can do the same for the back. Go ahead and remove that cam. And then work that bolt out. Just move the upper control arm up and down a little bit and work that bolt and get that bolt out. You want to keep these cams together for the rear and the front. With those two bolts removed and all the cams, this control arm should come out. If it doesn't just pop out, you can use a pry bar to get this out. We're getting this, there we go. And there's your control arm. Now with the new control arm, slide that in place. And then take the front cam bolt, get that lined up. And just work the control arm till that bolt goes through. Get your cam lined up in there. And this hole and the nylon insert should line up with the hole or the pin on the chassis. And the control arm might have to get moved back a little bit for that to insert in there. You can see it fits into place there. And just work that a little bit to match up. Here we go. Go ahead and start the nut on the front side. Now these cams here are to help the alignment on your vehicle. Now we didn't mark this here prior to pulling it apart because you can actually see the indentation of the cam itself or the marking of a clean spot on the chassis. And what you can do prior to pulling this apart is use a marker, a crayon, or you can actually scrape it with a screwdriver just to get a preliminary setting. So on your installation, you can go ahead and get this back down to the alignment shop to get the specs done properly. I'm going to go ahead and line that up and get that cam matched right up to where it was before. Push that bolt through, and then this cam will match up because it's keyed on that flat spot. It'll match the one on the inside. And go ahead and start that rear nut. Using that 21mm socket and ratchet, go ahead and get this lined up and get that nut tightened up. All right, we're going to go ahead and torque the front upper control arm bolt to 140 foot-pounds. And move to the back. Go ahead and reinstall the sway bar end link by putting the lower portion in, bushing and shim, sleeve. And this, what you're going to want to do is push that bolt up, get that washer on, use a pry bar, and lift that up just a little bit so you can get that sway bar end link pushed through. Go ahead and install the upper bushing and the washer, and then top it off with the nut. Use your 14mm socket and wrench to go ahead and tighten this up. All right, we just snugged it up a little bit. Next, we're going to go ahead and torque this nut to 17 foot-pounds. We're going to go ahead and reinstall the strut. And if you can get just one of those nuts on that upper strut just to hold it in place for you. We're going to go ahead and install the lower bolts into the strut. Get that lined up and get those started. The strut bolts in. We're going to go ahead and finish putting on the two nuts here. Then go ahead and reinstall the harness clip right there on the top of that strut. I'm going to go ahead and use the impact just to bottom these out, and then we're going to go ahead and torque these to 37 foot-pounds. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and lower the control arm into the knuckle, like so. Now install the upper control arm ball joint nut. And get that up as tight as you can by hand. And go ahead and torque these to 37 foot-pounds. And we'll go ahead and put the wheel back on here. And then we'll go ahead and install the lug nuts and torque those to 140 foot-pounds. You can now go ahead and properly torque these to 140 foot-pounds using the weight of the vehicle. Now we're going to go ahead and install the center cap. There's a picture of a valve stem on here, and on this is actually a notch right here, and there is a notch right here. You want to go ahead and make sure that these notches line up with one of these around the rim, and or make sure that that valve stem picture lines up with the valve stem on the wheel. That way there, when you go to remove the wheel or the center cap, you can insert a screwdriver into here and pop that center cap back off.